Ava Clark's day began at 6:15 a.m., long before the first bus rumbled onto the campus of Lincoln Heights High. She eased into the empty parking lot in her silver Corolla, coffee steaming in her reusable tumbler. As a dedicated 10th grade English teacher, she prized these solitary minutes before the hallways filled with lockers, chatter, and adolescent energy. Inside her classroom, room 207, Ava flipped on the lights and arranged her desk. Copies of To Kill a Mockingbird, stacked neatly, colored index cards for vocabulary practice, and a fresh whiteboard marker ready for her daily prompt. She'd taught Harper Lee's novel every fall for 6 years, guiding students to question the morality of their own small-town prejudices. Today's lesson would explore Atticus Finch's courtroom speech on justice and empathy, a theme she knew all too well. By 7:30 a.m., students filed in. Ava greeted each by name. "Good morning, Jamal." "Hey, Sophie, how was cross-country practice?" Building rapport that balanced warmth and authority. The lesson unfolded smoothly. She invited them to role-play the trial of Tom Robinson, then paused the scenario to ask, what happens when those in power devalue a life they don't understand? A hush fell. Several students glanced at Rebecca Taylor, the only white girl playing the prosecutor, as she sank in her seat, uncomfortable. For Ava, the moment echoed her own experiences of unfair judgment. After school, she stayed late to meet with the drama club, her after-school charge, rehearsing scenes for A Raisin in the Sun. By 5 p.m., the auditorium was dark and empty, except for her and a handful of students. She packed up her laptop, scripts, and a thermos of cold tea, then headed to her car. As she walked across the deserted lot, the golden late-afternoon light faded into dusk. At the exit gate, her Corolla idled behind a patrol SUV. The officer, mid-30s, muscular with a badge that read Officer Mark Randall, stepped out and strode to her driver's window before she could pull forward. The tinted glass rolled down. "Evening, ma'am. License and registration," he barked without introduction. His tone was curt, and his eyes flicked instinctively to her hands, dark skin against the wheel, and then back to her face, lips pressed into a tight line. "Of course, officer." Ava unclipped her badge from her lanyard. "I'm Ava Clark, English teacher at Lincoln Heights. Here's my license." She handed over the documents with calm politeness. Officer Randall scanned them, then looked up with a smirk. "English teacher, huh? You teaching those kids how to question authority now?" His voice held a sneer that stung more than any physical blow. Before she could reply, he continued, "You mind stepping out of the car? I want to ask you a few questions." Ava's heart pounded. She'd heard stories of black educators being targeted by police, but she had never expected it herself. Still, she lowered herself from the seat with measured composure. "Officer, may I ask why I'm being detained?" she inquired, voice steady. He folded his arms, blocking the light from her car's interior. "You match the description of someone who's been harassing drivers leaving this parking lot." "Ever been accused of harassment, Ms. Clark?" His words dripped with accusation. No one at the school had reported harassment, only the usual traffic congestion. She bit back a retort and met his gaze evenly. "I've never received a complaint, sir. I leave campus at this time every day." She gestured toward the empty lot. "You can verify that with the school office." Randall's expression hardened. He leaned closer. "Don't get slick with me. Maybe you should let me search your car." His finger tapped the hood of her Corolla. Ava's chest tightened. She knew her rights. "I'm not consenting to a search," she said calmly. "Do you have a warrant?" The silence stretched. The final rays of sun glinted off his badge. Then, with an exasperated huff, he straightened. "Fine. I'm letting you go this time." He tossed her paperwork through the window. But watch your mouth next time." Ava slid back behind the wheel, careful not to inhale the officer's lingering scent of ego and intimidation. As she drove away, her knuckles white on the wheel, tears of rage and humiliation welled in her eyes. Later that night, she sat at her kitchen table scrolling through her phone. A local teachers group on social media had already begun speculating about teacher harassment at Lincoln Heights. Fired by a mix of fury and principle, Ava recorded a short video. Speaking directly into the camera, she recounted the incident, her credentials, the officer's intimidation, and her refusal to be silenced. Her voice quivered at first, then grew firm as she challenged viewers. "How many times must we be judged by the color of our skin, rather than the content of our character?" Within hours, the clip racked up thousands of views. Colleagues, parents, and students commented in solidarity. National news outlets soon picked up the story. Black teacher confronts racist cop, one headline blared. As Ava scrolled past supportive messages and shocked viewers, she realized that her viral response would become more than personal vindication. It would ignite a nationwide debate about policing, racism in schools, and the very nature of authority. And as midnight settled, Ava Clark leaned back in her chair, exhausted but resolute, knowing that tomorrow's lesson plan would have to include more than literature. It would have to include truth. Ava Clark awoke before dawn to the muted roar of alerts on her phone. In the dim glow of her bedroom, she scrolled through notifications. Her video had exploded overnight. Screenshots of her confrontation with Officer Randall and clips of her calm, unwavering stand flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Hashtags like "that and teacher, not suspect," and "stand with Ava" trended nationally. Her heart pounded, not with pride, but with apprehension for what lay ahead. By 6:30 a.m., Ava was on the road toward Lincoln Heights High, the sky still dark. She rehearsed in her mind how she would greet students today, with steady calm, not defensiveness. As she turned onto Sycamore Avenue, she passed a cluster of television vans and newspaper trucks parked in the student lot. Reporters huddled outside the main entrance, cameras already set up to capture her arrival. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, took a deep breath, and lowered her tinted window as she approached the gate attendant. "Good morning," she said softly. "I'm Ava Clark, teacher in room 207. The guard, new to his post, blinked at her ID badge, then stepped aside. You're the teacher from the videos?" "Please," Ava replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Just let me through." Inside, the air buzzed with electricity. Students clustered in front of the press, holding handmade signs. "Thank you, Ms. Clark! Racism has no place here." Their cheers followed her as she strode past news crews. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel buoyed by their support, until a photographer's flash blinded her, and she recoiled inwardly. She wasn't ready to be a public symbol. In the teacher's lounge, murmurs rippled among her colleagues. Some stared at her iPad, where the local news station's morning broadcast looped her footage. Others offered whispered congratulations, yet a few teachers avoided her gaze, retreating when she entered. The vice principal, Mr. Jameson, approached with tight shoulders. "Ava, a word in my office?" he said, voice low. She nodded and followed him down the empty hall. Once the door closed, his tone softened. "I want to support you. Your courage was extraordinary. But the district is uneasy. We've had calls from parents demanding you be disciplined for escalating tensions. And the police union is asking the board to censure you." Ava felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Mr. Jameson, I did nothing wrong. I asserted my rights when I was bullied," he sighed. "I know, but right now I need you to be prepared for backlash, letters, phone calls, maybe even formal complaints." She swallowed her frustration. "I understand, but I won't apologize for standing up to racism." He offered a weary smile. "We're arranging a private meeting with the superintendent this afternoon. I'll back you up." When she left his office, a swarm of students pressed around her, voices rising. "Ms. Clark, can we see the video again? Will you lead our assembly on bias this Friday? We printed these posters for room 207. Their enthusiasm was a balm to her frayed nerves. She knelt to sign their posters, offering genuine, grateful smiles. In room 207, she found her students waiting, some in tears of pride, others with guarded relief. She began the day's lesson carefully. First, a silent reflection on the night's events, then a circle discussion. Sophia, normally quiet, spoke up falteringly. "I saw people online calling you disrespectful. It made me scared. You risked your job for us." Ava's throat constricted. "And I risked nothing compared to the thousands of people who face daily harassment," she replied gently. "But I did what any of us should do when someone tries to strip away our dignity." At lunch, news crews camped in the courtyard. When she emerged, they surrounded her once more. Ava took steadying breaths and answered calmly, "Reporter, Ms. Clark, do you regret how viral this has become?" Ava, "Regret? Number. I regret that so many people still believe they can intimidate a black woman without consequence." The exchange aired that evening on all major networks. By mid-afternoon, the superintendent's office was a flurry of activity. Ava sat across from Dr. Whitfield, stern yet not unsympathetic, flanked by HR representatives and a lawyer from the school board. Her heart thumped as she waited her turn to speak. When Dr. Whitfield finally addressed her, his tone was formal. Ava, we appreciate your passion. However, the district must ensure that interactions with law enforcement remain professional. We ask you to submit a written account of the incident by Friday and participate in a mediation session with Officer Randall. She inhaled, recalling the fear that had gripped her the night before. Dr. Whitfield, I will submit my account, but I cannot in good conscience mediate with someone who used his authority to threaten me. Silence filled the room. The lawyer cleared his throat. You're not under subpoena, Ms. Clark. Mediation is voluntary. The superintendent gave a small nod. We will not force you. Thank you for your honesty. Ava exhaled. It was a victory, for her rights, for principle. But the undercurrent of institutional caution left her unsettled. That evening, exhausted, she entered her front door to find her fiancé, Marcus, waiting with dinner. He enveloped her in a hug. You did more today than I could ever ask, he murmured. Ava rested her head on his chest, tears finally escaping. I'm so tired, she whispered, and I'm scared of what's next. He held her tighter. Whatever comes, you'll face it with integrity. You've already sparked conversations that won't die. As they ate, her phone buzzed with a message from the local NAACP chapter. They wanted her to speak at their next community meeting. Across the screen, invitations from other schools requested her to share her story at assemblies. Ava realized that although her life had been upended, her voice had become a beacon for countless others. That night, before sleep claimed her, she drafted bullet points for every upcoming engagement. Her talk to the NAACP, the student assembly, potential panels on policing and race. She ended her list with a single note to herself. Speak truth. Teach courage. And with that resolve, Ava Clark drifted into a restless sleep, ready to meet the whirlwind she had set in motion, and determined to turn its force into lasting change. The morning sun had barely crept over the rooftops when Ava Clark stepped onto the campus of Lincoln Heights High, her heart pounding with a mixture of purpose and apprehension. Word of her video had spread far beyond social media. By now, local TV anchors, community organizers, and even national pundits had staked out her every move. As she passed through the front gates, she spotted clusters of students clustered around their phones, scrolling through feeds that replayed her calm, unflinching words. Some cheered, others simply stared, mouths agape. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Ava poured herself a cup of reheated coffee while colleagues offered murmured congratulations and sympathetic glances. Mr. Alvarez, the history teacher who had always been one of her staunchest supporters, pulled her aside. Ava, word is the PTA is calling an emergency meeting tonight. They want your presence at City Hall. His voice was thick with concern. There will be protesters and counter-protesters. You need to decide if you want to go. She nodded, draining the bitter brew. I have to, she said softly. If I don't show up, they'll say I'm afraid. Her first class began with a palpable hush. When she stepped into room 207, 10 pairs of teenage eyes fixed on her, some wide with pride, others timid from fear of association. She opened her laptop and projected the evening's agenda. Community Forum on Policing and Education. City Hall, 7 p.m. A ripple of excitement passed through the room. Ms. Clark, asked Jamal, a diligent student with keen eyes. Are you going to respond to the police union's call for your censure? Ava inhaled. Yes. Tonight, I'll speak my truth to the board and anyone else who shows up. I'll explain why I refuse to be silenced by intimidation. Bell rang and the students filed out, some trailing behind to offer handmade notes of support. By midday, her inbox overflowed with dozens of messages. Invitations to speak at neighboring schools. Offers from civil rights lawyers to represent her pro bono, should the district pursue formal action. Even an email from a state senator requesting her testimony at an upcoming hearing on police reform. Yet with each offer came a shadow of risk. A few messages carried thinly veiled threats. Stay in your lane, teacher. Don't stir up trouble. Remember who writes your paychecks. Ava closed her laptop with trembling fingers. She felt the weight of every opinion, every expectation, some urging her to lean in, others demanding she back down. After school, she met with the drama club in the darkened auditorium. Their rehearsal of A Raisin in the Sun had morphed into a safe space for candid discussion. The lead actor, Marcus Reed, approached her with cautious excitement. Ms. Clark, after hearing what happened, we want to adapt the final scene to include a moment of protest. Your protest. Could we incorporate your actual speech into our performance? Her eyes softened at the request. I'd be honored, she replied. But let's keep it authentic. No sensationalism. This is about real lives. That evening, Ava arrived at City Hall's community room to find a sea of folding chairs already occupied. Parents in suits clutched clipboards. Uniformed teachers whispered among themselves. Activists held homemade placards, protect our rights, and respect educators. At the far end, a smaller group of uniformed officers stood silently, arms crossed. Their leader, Captain Hargrove, recognized her and nodded curtly. When the meeting commenced, the city councilman introduced the agenda with diplomatic neutrality. Then, one by one, citizens rose to deliver their testimonies. A young mother described waking in tears at the idea that someone with a badge could victimize my daughter over a parking spot. A retired cop spoke in defense of Randall, painting him as a good man under pressure. The room's energy oscillated between thunderous applause and stony silence. Finally, Ava took the microphone. She wore no blazer tonight, just a simple blouse and her Stand with Ava wristband. She glanced at the officers, then at the rows of parents and neighbors. Her voice trembled for an instant before steadying. Good evening. I'm not here seeking attention, nor am I trying to vilify an entire institution. I am here because, as a teacher, I believe in the power of words. And yet tonight, it was action that spoke louder. When Officer Randall demanded I step out of my car and threatened to search me without cause, he wasn't just intimidating me. He was undermining every hard-earned lesson I've taught about justice, about empathy, about respect for human dignity. Her words resonated in the hushed room. She recounted the details of the stop, not as a melodrama, but as a lesson in rights and responsibilities. She described how the school community had rallied, how her students now understood that speaking truth carried both risk and necessity. As she concluded with, "We cannot allow prejudice to go unchecked in the very neighborhoods we teach and serve," the half-empty cups and notepads trembled in the eagerly leaning audience. Applause erupted, but it came first from the back row, where a group of officers stood. Even Captain Hargrove offered a reluctant, slow clap before turning away. The tension broke. Parents and teachers rose in unison, stamping their feet in approval. Afterward, as the chairs were folded and the placards stacked, community leaders approached Ava with handshakes and tearful thanks. A local news crew pressed her for comments. She declined, saying only, "I'm just a teacher doing what's right." Outside, the crisp autumn air hit her face, and she exhaled deeply for the first time all day. Driving home, her phone buzzed with messages. The school board had postponed any formal action pending a full review. The teachers' union had launched a Protect Our Educators campaign using her story. A national education magazine wanted to run a feature on her classroom methods. At home, Marcus greeted her at the door with a warm embrace. "I saw you out there," he said. "You owned that room." Ava rested her head on his shoulder. "We did, but this is just the beginning." Later that night, she drafted an outline for the debate she'd been invited to join on national television, a title already in her head. When Authority Becomes Intimidation. She fell asleep to the glow of her laptop, screen mind-buzzing with the courage of her conviction and the knowledge that every wave of resistance she sparked was one more step toward a broader reckoning. In the quiet darkness, Ava Clark understood that her viral moment had transformed into a movement, and that, in the struggle for justice, the lessons she imparted in room 207 were now unfolding on a stage, far beyond the classroom walls. The Monday. After the City Hall forum, Ava Clark arrived at Lincoln Heights High to find her classroom door plastered with thank you cards and hand-drawn posters, a red apple crowned with justice, a silhouette of raised fists beneath the words, "We stand with you." Her students greeted her with cheering applause as she stepped inside, and for a moment the sting of yesterday's tension melted away. She set down her tote bag and smiled, tracing the edges of a poster that read, "Ms. Clark teaches more than English." At 8 a.m. sharp, she launched into the day's lesson, still To Kill a Mockingbird, but reframed through the lens of her own experience. Atticus Finch says, "The one place where a man ought to get a square deal is in a courtroom." "Yesterday, I took that lesson to City Hall," she told them, voice firm. She played a short clip of her forum testimony, her face calm, her words measured, and the students leaned forward, rapt. Afterward, they broke into small groups to discuss, when have you seen authority misused? How would you speak up? The air crackled with energy as sophomores shared stories of unfair detention hall assignments and murmured parental judgments in sports tryouts. Ava circulated, nodding, reminding them that voices raised in truth could reshape systems. That afternoon, the teacher's lounge was a flurry of congratulations and strategy. The English department head, Ms. Martinez, tapped her shoulder. The State Teachers Union wants you to address their convention next month, she whispered. They're booking you as the keynote on implicit bias in education. Ava exhaled, stunned. Tonight she'd face school board scrutiny. Next month, she'd speak to thousands of educators. She realized her journey had leapt from solitary bravery to institutional leadership. After school, Ava joined a meeting at the local NAACP chapter. The room hummed with community activists, pastors, and parents, all drawn by the momentum she'd ignited. They planned a teach-in for the following weekend on the courthouse lawn. Teachers, lawyers, and students sharing testimonies about racial profiling. Ava volunteered to host a workshop titled Know Your Rights, Empowering Young Citizens. As she outlined interactive scenarios, traffic stops, mall security stops, school hallway confrontations, she felt the familiar rush of purpose, education, extending beyond textbooks into real life. That evening, she attended the first of 2 scheduled town hall Q&A sessions at the police precinct. Officer Randall sat at a long table alongside the chief of police and several community liaisons. When the floor opened, Ava stepped to the mic, her pulse fluttering. I don't want to vilify Officer Randall, she began, steadying herself. I want to ensure no other teacher or student feels powerless in the face of intimidation. The chief announced that Internal Affairs had placed Randall on administrative leave pending review. He thanked Ava for sparking the department's new de-escalation training pilot. Applause rippled through the room. Both supporters and uniformed officers rising to honor the step toward accountability. Back in her classroom the next morning, Ava found 2 senior students waiting. Jamal held a petition signed by over 300 teenagers requesting a permanent bias awareness unit in social studies curricula. Mira presented a proposal for an annual Diversity Day live webcast, featuring student speeches and local leaders. Tears stung Ava's eyes as she read their words. You taught us to open our eyes. Now we want to open everyone else's. She agreed on the spot, promising to draft an email to the principal's office that afternoon. By Friday, Lincoln Heights High announced a new partnership with the county's Department of Education, a pilot program embedding civil rights education into every subject, history, science, even math word problems, centered on equitable resource distribution. Ava co-chaired the curriculum committee, working late into the night at the school library with Ms. Martinez, the social studies chair, and 2 student representatives. As they sketched lesson plans on a whiteboard, analyze Miranda v. Arizona, data on traffic stops by demographics, literary voices from the civil rights movement. The distant hum of the library's air conditioning seemed to exhale a collective sigh of progress. That weekend, Ava stood under crisp autumn skies on the courthouse steps, microphone in hand, leading her Know Your Rights workshop for 50 high schoolers. They practiced how to assert their rights if stopped, how to document interactions respectfully, and how to debrief afterward. Around her, community lawyers circulated to answer legal questions, and onlookers snapped photos. This was activism in motion, education in action. As the session closed, a student raised her hand. Ms. Clark, will you come with us to testify at the state capitol hearing on police reform next month? Ava paused, imagining a busload of teens filing onto the marble steps of the legislature. Her heart swelled. Yes, she said, voice unwavering. We'll go together. Walking back to her car, Ava felt the weight of every choice she'd made. The decision to record her confrontation, to speak at City Hall, to teach honestly, and now to lead institutional change. The quiet teacher who once feared the dark parking lot had become a catalyst for curriculum overhaul, community empowerment, and statewide policy debate. And as she glanced at her reflection in the courthouse windows, a teacher framed by autumn foliage and the promise of a new movement, she knew the lesson had only just begun. Final bell. She organized handouts for Monday's bias awareness lesson. Printouts on landmark free speech cases, small stacks of index cards with role-play prompts, color-coded folders for each student group, Outside the window, the autumn sky was streaked with copper and rose, but Ava barely noticed. Her mind was still racing from the whirlwind week. The moment she packed her last folder into her tote bag, her phone buzzed with an urgent text from Mr. Jameson, the vice principal. District office needs you at 5 p.m. Please come directly to the boardroom. Ollie, her teaching assistant, gave her a sympathetic look. Good luck, he whispered. Ava swallowed and nodded, steeling herself for another round of scrutiny. At exactly 5:02 p.m., she stepped into the mahogany-paneled district boardroom, where 7 school board members sat behind a raised dais. A dozen administrators lined the walls, and at least 20 parents, teachers, and students filled the seats. A banner read, Special Session, Review of Teacher Conduct and Community Response. In the back, 2 uniformed officers, one her former antagonist, Officer Randall, stood impassively. Board President Mrs. Nguyen called the meeting to order. This session will address the recent events surrounding Ms. Ava Clark's interaction with Officer Randall, the ensuing viral video, and its impact on district operations. She gestured to Randall. Officer Randall, would you like to begin? Randall stepped forward, shoulders rigid. Clearing his throat, he recounted his version of the parking lot stop. I followed proper procedure, Ms. Clark became argumentative and refused to comply with basic directives. I regret any misunderstanding, but my actions were within policy. He concluded by requesting a formal reprimand of unprofessional conduct against Ava for escalating a routine traffic matter. A murmur rippled through the audience. Ava felt her stomach tighten. Then Mrs. Nguyen turned to her. Miss Clark, you may present your account. A hush fell. Ava took a steadying breath, centered herself at the lectern, and began in a clear, unwavering voice. She walked the board through the timeline, pulling into the lot at 5 p.m., watching Randall's patrol car block her exit, his brusque demand for license and registration, his insinuations that she harassed drivers, his suggestion of a warrantless search. She paused as she described her refusal, citing the Fourth Amendment, right to be free from unreasonable searches, and his immediate, contemptuous withdrawal of her documents, tossing them back. I did not seek publicity, she said, fingers curled around the lectern. I sought only to protect my dignity and the rights of every citizen, teacher, student, parent, who might suffer similar harassment. When my response went viral, it became a mirror held up to our community, revealing that prejudice can wear a uniform. Her gaze swept the room. If we punish me for standing up to intimidation, what message do we send to the young people I teach every day? A crisp silence followed. Then Mr. Carter, the board's only teacher representative, rose and spoke, voice firm. Ms. Clark's actions were courageous and educational. She modeled for our students how to assert their rights responsibly. I move that the district commend her rather than censure. A second board member nodded. Discussion flared on both sides. Some decried potential police district tensions. Others championed necessary pushback against abuse of power. After nearly an hour, a vote was called. One by one, hands rose in support of commending Ava and launching a joint district police community relations task force. When the final tally appeared, 5-2 in her favor, Ava felt her chest expand, relief and vindication flooding in. The 2 dissenting members, stern-faced, abstained, but offered no censure. As the gavel fell, applause erupted. Teachers and parents leaped to their feet. Students in the back banged the wooden benches. Officer Randall's jaw tightened. He slipped out quietly, avoiding her gaze. That evening, Ava walked home under lamplit streets, her tote bag light at last. She passed students gathered outside the local coffee shop chanting, "No justice, no peace," in support. Some holding signs reading, "Teachers are leaders and respect our rights." She paused, placing a hand over her heart, and allowed herself a small, grateful smile. The next morning, Lincoln Heights High was alive with energy. In the cafeteria, the student council organized a spontaneous solidarity breakfast, where students served pancakes to faculty, each plate bearing a tiny flag reading, "Stand up, speak out." In the hallway, therapists from the community task force set up booths offering resources on legal rights, conflict resolution, and de-escalation techniques. When Ava entered room 207, her students greeted her with cheers that swelled and subsided like waves. They presented her with a handmade scrapbook, newspaper clippings, screenshot messages of support from across the country, photos of solidarity rallies, and handwritten letters, some from strangers she'd never met. Ava traced each page, tears glistening as she read, "You taught me courage is louder than fear. Because of you, I know my rights. Thank you for making us believed." Later that day, alumni who had graduated years before came by for hugs and gratitude. Parents lingered at the door, offering notes and home-baked cookies. The principal stopped by with news. The superintendent had dedicated a Teacher Appreciation Day in her honor, and the State Education Board invited her to testify before the legislature on police-school relations. That evening, Ava logged onto a national webinar hosted by an education nonprofit. She shared her story with thousands of educators, fielding questions about classroom strategies for teaching civil rights, safeguarding free speech, and partnering with law enforcement constructively. Her closing words echoed the core of her journey. We owe it to our students not only to teach them English, history, or math, but to model integrity in action. When we empower them to stand up and speak out, we build a future where justice is not just a lesson, but a lived experience. As she signed off, the chat exploded with virtual applause emojis and messages of gratitude from Canada, the UK, and beyond. Ava leaned back, exhausted yet exhilarated. The viral moment that had terrified her only days before had rippled outward into policy change, community healing, and educational reform. Before drifting to sleep, she opened her notebook and added a final bullet under Chapter 5. From viral video to legislative impact, teaching truth on a national stage. And with that, Ava Clark finally allowed herself to rest, knowing that her defiance had become a catalyst for real, lasting change.